Whether you count them or not, beginning this January, Ontario is putting calories on the menu. Literally. For chain restaurants, it means real change. For consumers, it offers new, potentially valuable information. Will it do what policymakers hope? Let's ask. Mary Scorbatakos. She is a postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Toronto. And we welcome back familiar food specialists Jamie Kennedy, the chef and owner of Jamie Kennedy Kitchens, and Joshna Maharaj, the chef and food activist. First time for you ever on this program.
That's
Lovely
correct.
to welcome you. And
Thank
first
you.
time for you guys back this season. This is
you.
our 11th on TVO. Happy to welcome you two back.
Thanks.
Okay, shall we do this, Sheldon, right off the top here? Let's bring this thing up here. Earlier this year, the provincial government announced that as of January 1st, 2017, all restaurants with 20 or more locations will be required to display calorie information on their menus. They will also be required to post a quote-unquote contextual statement regarding average daily caloric requirements to help consumers put the calorie into context. For example, you'll see the average adult requires approximately 2,000 to 2,400 calories per day. However, individual calorie needs may vary, and this must appear on every page of the menu. Now, we have a little example here. Show to camera. There we go. This is the Firkin, right? This is the Firkin restaurant. Okay. They're a chain. They got lots of restaurants. They got ahead of the game, and they have been doing this already. And they post calorie information, and they're going to need to update the menu's font size. That's the big change they're going to make, because right now they've got the prices, and that's what's going to happen in the future. You're going to see the caloric intake in the same font size as the prices. And this theoretically gives people information they need in order to make better choices when they order. But let's find out if that actually happens. Joshna, when you found out about this idea, what'd you think?
I was not a fan.
Why not?
I was not excited about it because I firmly believe that there are such thing as good calories and bad calories. And I'm assuming that the intended goal of this is healthier people and making healthier food choices. And I don't believe that this will actually result in that.
Because this just presents everything as calories, not whether they're good calories or bad
and there's
calories.
so much more we need to know about our food that informs what makes it healthy or not. That simply looking at numbers is not leading us in the right direction.
Jamie, your view on this when you first heard about it?
You know, I mirror what Joshna is saying, Steve. It's when you talk to someone like me who's a cook who just works with raw food and you know transforms it through the cooking process into food. It's a natural process is to give a balance of all the food groups. I don't even think about calories, to tell you the truth. I cook with how I feel is healthy cooking, and I feel that it is, and I think that's more important for people to than being confused about how many calories I should be taking, this and that.
Okay, but you're an exception.
Yeah.
Let's consider chains of restaurants of 20 plus, which may not care that much about whether the food they're giving people is as healthy as the stuff you are feeding people.
Right.
In which case, does the calorie count help if it's on the menu in good-sized font?
Well, it's always good to have an antagonist in the world, right? So I think from our lobby, if you want, we are always championing working with raw ingredients, encouraging people to cook more. Perhaps that will inform what chain restaurants are actually serving in their restaurants, and so I would challenge whether any of these chains are actually serving any local food, for example.
Right. Okay, Mary, let's get to you and find out why, in your view, the government thought this was worth doing in the first place.
Sure. I think there are two main reasons why this kind of policy is important. The first has to do with the consumer, and the whole idea is that this policy is about giving people more information about their food and to help them to make a more informed choice. So in some cases, that might mean that a consumer chooses to order a lower calorie meal, but in other cases, a consumer might go to a restaurant, see that calorie number, and then choose maybe only to eat half of that meal and save the rest for later. And then still in other cases, there might be scenarios where someone really wants to order something like, say, a hamburger, but maybe they're afraid that that's too unhealthy. They decide to go with like a chicken club instead. But when the menus aren't labeled, they don't know that, in fact, that chicken club maybe has more calories than the hamburger because of the mayonnaise and the bacon. So, in fact, with the labeled menu, they know that they can order that hamburger, and maybe it's not as bad as they thought.
So that's useful information.
Exactly. It's just about giving people one extra piece of information to consider when making food choices. But that's the first benefit. And the second benefit that's not discussed as much is the effect that this policy has on the restaurants themselves. So we've seen evidence from the US in one particular county, after they implemented their menu labeling policy, the calorie content of their menu offerings decreased. So it shows us that this is one way to give those big chains incentive to get better. And that means that everyone benefits from this policy, irrespective of whether there's someone who actually is paying attention to the labels or someone who ignores them entirely.
I suspect we have anecdotal evidence of Canada of whether this works. You point out this, there are studies in the States that go back much further. But here in Canada, from what I gather, hang on, I got a note about this here somewhere. Okay, we saw the example earlier from Firkin, and they do the what are the pickled something or others? What is that?
Fried pickles?
Fried pickles, okay, versus nachos. And the
Right.
nachos are like almost 1,400 calories, and the fried pickles are fewer than 300. And apparently, once they started, there it is right there. Once they started putting those numbers up there, apparently their sales of fried pickles went way up. Now, the nachos didn't decrease, but the fried pickles went way up. Now, that's anecdotal evidence. Can we make more of that than just that?
No, I think that's a perfectly good example of the kind of thing that we'll hopefully see when this policy comes into place. The idea that people might be thinking they're ordering something that's better for them when in fact there's another choice that they're afraid of that isn't as bad as they thought. So the idea is that in some ways it can give people more choices because they're aware of what they're actually ordering.
Now, let me do one more with you, and that is on that overall number. You saw that the so-called contextual statement where they'll say, 2,000 to 2,400 calories per person per day is ideal. Is that true?
Well, if you ask any dietitian or nutritionist, what's the average amount of calories that a person should consume each day, they'll probably tell you that number is 2,000. That's just a rough estimate. We know that everyone's energy requirement is different. It depends on your age, it depends on whether you're male or female, and most importantly, it depends on how active you are. So the government decided to increase that range a little bit and extend it to 2,400, which might be appropriate for some people, but keep in mind, most Canadians are sedentary. We're not moving enough. So most of us are probably going to be closer to that 2,000 number. But one thing that the government did do, which we have to applaud them for, is they're the first jurisdiction anywhere to implement a special contextual statement for children's foods. So because kids obviously require fewer calories than adults, they're going to have kid-based calorie recommendations that will come into effect a year later.
Okay. Do you feel that labeling the caloric intake 2,000 to 2,400 is, a useful thing to do?
Not really.
No? You're not a fan. You're not a fan of any of this, are you?
I don't, only because it really flies in the face of the values that I really maintain about food, Steve. That is the piece, right? The idea that there are good foods and bad foods is a problem, right? I prefer to think of like all the time versus sometimes, right? Because vilifying food is a real problem. You know what I mean? And it sets up this really kind of combative relationship with food, whereas I really want to encourage people to put more trust in their food and to connect to food as a life source and you know what I mean, as sort of a broader health element in life than just like, am I going to be bad today or am I going to be good? Like, it's really problematic with the messaging that it suggests. And it doesn't tell you anything about where that food came from, how it was cooked, any of that, right? Which I believe is much more important than how many calories is involved.
Although, Jamie, I did want to follow up on something you said in your first answer, which is that when you cook, you don't think about calories at all. Really?
No, that's not altogether true. But I do think about balance. Balance is really important. So I think when you spend your whole life cooking, like I have, you start to develop a sort of an innate sense of balance. So I'm not going to propose a menu that's going to be really laden in carbohydrate. I'm not going to propose a menu that's really laden in protein or fat or anything.
But have you got a little internal counter going in your head when you're making a meal saying, okay, I'm nudging up to 2,400 here, that's it?
Probably, but I wouldn't put a number on it, but yes, in theory, yes, there is that process going on. And I would like to also state that exercise is a huge part of diet, right? It's not just what we're putting in, it's how we're using the calories that's important. If you say that we're a sedentary population, I have to agree with that. And so obviously we need to intake fewer calories in order to balance that out. But maybe what's more important is to think about balance in the sense of exercising more.
Let me follow up on this. Not all calories are created equal business, because McDonald's famously introduced salads many years ago. And of course, I think we now know that that Caesar salad, if you put the dressing on it and if you eat all the cheese in that Caesar salad, and the croutons too, I guess, I mean, there's probably more calories in that than there might be in a quarter pounder, right?
That's right.
So not all calories are created equal. So is this contextual statement of 2,000 to 2,400 really that helpful at the end of the day?
Well, I think it is helpful because it allows people to put that information into context, because we don't want them to look at something and say, oh, 300, that sounds like a really big number, or, what is 1,500? How do we make sense of that number? So we need to enable consumers to be able to actually use the information. But I do agree, not all calories are created equal. And you raise a good point with that salad. Do we necessarily want people to switch from the salad to the hamburger? In that case, the salad is going to have a lot of plant nutrients that the hamburger is not going to have. So it becomes a trade-off. And some of those calories that are on that salad, the fat calories, are going to help your body to absorb the nutrients in that salad. So maybe you want those calories. So I completely agree with this idea that not all calories are created equal. But the issue is that we Canadians eat too many calories each day.
Sure.
And we just need to make people more aware of what they're eating.
But when I go into a fast food place right now, which I do way too often, you do see the caloric intake of the food posted somewhere. Now, usually it's in pretty small type, or it might be in a pamphlet behind the counter or on the wall somewhere where you're not really paying attention. But it is there. Why is that not adequate?
Well, it's not consistently there. Some of the large chains do voluntarily provide this information, but as you say, it's in a pamphlet, it might be on the wall somewhere, somewhere where consumers are not actually noticing it.
Joshna, what about the notion that, okay, fine, you've got the caloric value of the foods on the menu coming up, that's all well and good, but maybe we should have other information as well that would be more helpful, like the fat content, like maybe the sodium content, that kind of thing?
Maybe.
Would you be for that?
Maybe. I worry about all of that. Like, I feel like there's going to be an overload on the menu, right, of all of that information. Because you could start with, like, the farm that it came from, how it was grown. Like, we could go crazy with all of this, right? Because your salad example is a good one, but at the same time, it's lettuce covered in mayonnaise. A Caesar salad, right? Not terribly healthy. But then compare it to industrially produced beef, which is the burger option, right? There's all of these things, which I think is exactly what people are wrestling with right now.
Which is better?
Right.
Settle it for us. Which is actually healthier for you?
Neither.
Neither, eh? Neither one.
Neither of those are a great option for fueling your bod.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you just want to eat something delicious, do whatever you want.
Right.
But for actually for nourishing you, neither is a great option, sadly.
Jamie, if you don't have to because you don't have 20 locations, but if you had to, in your professional dealings, put this kind of information on your menus at your places, how would that impact your business, do you think?
I think it really would, because I'd be spending so much time, scientifically trying to figure out caloric content of each of the menu items. I don't know if I'd really have a lot of time for cooking. I have a question for you, though, Mary. It's about what time of day that we're taking in calories. Does that have an effect on our metabolism, like how we're able to metabolize calories?
Well, I always like to go with the breakfast like a king, dinner lunch like a prince. Lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper kind of philosophy of eating. The idea that if you think of your body like a car, you want to fuel up before you go out for your drive. You want to give yourself that energy. Not everyone agrees with that. The body has ways to store energy for later and such, but I always think that you should fuel yourself before you're going to have a lot of
Isn't that funny?
activity.
We do the exact opposite.
And we do culturally,
Dinner's our big meal.
we do the opposite.
True, right?
But I think everyone's ideal diet is different, and it's a matter of figuring out what works for you and spacing your food out accordingly.
What about the fat levels and the sodium levels and all of that stuff on the menu in addition to the caloric intake? You for that?
Well, it's hard to put all those numbers on one menu. As we said, there's not that much space. But one of the shortcomings of this bill in Ontario is that they haven't required that all of that information be made available in a pamphlet on their website, whereas this has been the case in the US. When they passed their national legislation, they said you've got to label calories, but then you have to put sodium, saturated fat, all those nutrients that we commonly see on a nutrition label, you have to put that information on your website, and you have to put it in a pamphlet so that if a consumer comes into your restaurant and they're watching their sodium intake, they can request it, they have that pamphlet, they can look at those other numbers. So I'm all for giving people more information beyond just calories to help them make their choice, but Ontario decided to only label calories.
Okay, more information. How much do you think people really want this information?
I think it depends on the person. Like I said, somebody who has high blood pressure, they're going to want that sodium information. But someone who's tuned into the local food environment, they're going to want some of the things that Joshna and Jamie raised. Where did this food come from? How was it produced? So everyone is different in what they're going to want. But our nutrition facts tables on processed foods have a core 13 nutrients. Like I said, saturated fat, sodium, these sorts of nutrients. And it would have been great if we also had that information for our restaurant foods.
Gotcha. In our remaining few moments here, I want to do a bit of a U-turn here. And just because it's your first visit here in this, our 11th season, I wanted to just get a sense about what you two were up to over the summer, because I hear you both had some pretty interesting things on the go. Jamie, what about you? What'd you do this summer?
Well, Steve, I had a kind of dream come true summer. It really was. I had a weekly dinner series that convened on the farm. So I have this farm in Prince Edward County. I don't know if the audience knows about
Jamie,
that.
I believe we just call it the county.
Oh, yes. So you know more.
You notice that?
Yeah, you know.
People from Prince Edward County just call it the
So
county.
we had this dinner down on the farm in the county every Saturday night, all throughout the summer. And it was an opportunity to revisit the creative process of putting a menu together week by week, responding to whatever was available to me locally in Prince Edward County.
Huh. How many people would show up?
About 55, 60
Per?
per. Yeah.
Nice.
It became a sellout. It was really wonderful.
How much a head?
It's $225.
$225 per person.
Yeah.
And you sold those things out?
Yeah.
That seems
good,
pricey.
right?
Waiting list.
Wait, no kidding. Guy, I guess he knows what he's doing.
It's a pretty good racket, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what do you, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate this, but what do you think the impact on the economy of the county was because you did that during the course of the summer?
It was probably an interesting little side note. There's a lot more going on in the county that is contributing to the local economy, but certainly it's an interesting adjunct to whatever else was going on.
It was a draw.
It was a draw, and it was also an opportunity for local winemakers to have a platform to speak, because that that was part of it too, Steve. It wasn't just dinner. It was about a rural experience on a farm with gastronomy. So there was a dinner involved, but there was also storytelling from local fishers, vegetable producers, cheese makers, winemakers. They all had the opportunity. They were invited to come tell their stories and sit down around the table and be there. For
Now, when you're
evening.
cooking for 55 people, can you actually have any fun?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Just checking. All right.
Yeah.
You went much further afield than the county.
I did.
Where did you go?
I did a lot of traveling, and I went to Rio, which was amazing.
During the Olympics?
In between Olympics and Paralympics.
Okay.
There was this wonderful experiment of a kitchen set up by two really interesting guys. Massimo Bottura is an Italian chef whose restaurant has just been named the best restaurant in the world.
Where is it?
In Modena, in Italy, Osteria Francescana. And he's got a fire underneath him about food waste. So they built this kitchen space with the intention that they would use food waste, surplus food from the Olympic Games. Chefs, a rotating roster of chefs would arrive to cook a 3-course meal to be fed to the vulnerable populations around the area, many of whom have been displaced by the games and that sort of thing. And I amazingly got an invitation to go cook dinner there.
And the kitchen was right in like the barrio, like
It
right
is,
the
like right
downtown
in the
part
favelas.
of
And it
Rio.
In the
literally
favelas.
was an abandoned space between two buildings that they put a floor and a roof on and got kitchen appliances in there. Electricity was still a little bit shaky when I was there, but by the end of it, 200 tons of food waste, of food that would have otherwise gone to landfill, will have been used to feed folks.
How did it feel to participate in that?
Amazing. Both because that is really the work that I do as a chef, representing Canada was really lovely, and connecting to this community of chefs who was thinking beyond their restaurants this way was a super huge honor. I loved it.
And were the chefs from everywhere? All over the world?
Yes, all over the world.
All over the world.
Lots of Latinos, lots of Europeans, but all over the world. Somebody I think had come from Japan, if you can imagine.
Anybody from the county?
Nobody from the county. Maybe next time. Exactly.
Terrific. Well, that sounds like two very exciting summers that you two had.
It was good.
I didn't get a chance to ask you about your summer, but I'm going to assume it was fantastic.
It was great.
Okay, glad to hear it. Jamie, Joshna, good to see you two again.
Thanks,
Mary, thank
Steve.
you for making your first appearance here. I hope we see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.